Only the worst criminals are sentenced to death row. In this area of the prison system, criminals are urged to get their final moments in order while they await a certain execution. Though one of the only perks of being a death row inmate is that you can request whatever you'd like as your final meal. This has led to some pretty strange requests over the years. Before we get started, be sure to hit that like button and ring the notification bell to stay up to date with our latest videos. This man was convicted of taking the life of another person in a tragically vicious manner. He was arrested soon after the crime, ultimately being sentenced to death by hanging. Victor submitted an appeal to the courts to get this ruling overturned, but according to local laws, the only person who could grant this appeal was President John F. Kennedy. Kennedy read through the court transcripts and determined that this crime was far too gruesome to allow a man like this to continue his life on Earth. Though Iowa's governor did his best to persuade Kennedy, he ultimately decided in the favor of the courts, allowing Victor to be sentenced to death row. Victor soon became the final federal inmate in the United States to be sentenced to death, as the Furman v. Georgia law was passed immediately afterward, banning any further death penalties. Most final meals are gluttonous and over the top. However, when Victor was asked what he would like as his final meal, he made an incredibly simple request: a single olive with the pit still inside. This man is widely known as one of the cruelest, heartless humans to ever walk the face of the earth. Timothy McVeigh was an American who was behind a terrible attack that took place in Oklahoma City, causing several explosions that claimed the lives of 168 people and injured at least 680 others. This attack was considered the most vicious and destructive crime to have ever taken place in the United States before 2001. Even to this day, it remains the most deadly criminal attacks to have been committed by an American. Timothy was put through the court system with him being found guilty. The court sentenced him to death by lethal injection when he was only 33 years old. This was because he was tried and convicted of all 168 counts of taking the life of another human. When looking at this man, you would likely assume that he'd request a rather hearty final meal, maybe a steak, fries, and a few beers. Though he requested quite the opposite: 2 pints of mint chocolate chip ice cream. This man's case is very strange, as he was convicted of his crimes by a jury and there was a ton of evidence against him. Though Angel Nieves Diaz insisted that he was innocent throughout his interrogation, his court proceedings, and the following years that led to his death. He was arrested for his supposed involvement in taking another person's life, as well as kidnapping charges and armed robbery charges. The courts unanimously agreed that he was the man behind these awful crimes, sentencing him to death by lethal injection at the age of 55. However, Angel never admitted any wrongdoing and insisted he was an innocent man. While we can certainly understand this stance throughout his trial, it seems incredibly odd that he would maintain his innocence up until his final day on Earth. Though Angel insisted that he was an innocent man, when asked about a final meal, Angel declined to request one. He was then offered a standard prison meal, but he declined that as well, leaving this world with an empty stomach and a chip on his shoulder. Stephen Woods is a man whose court case is incredibly bizarre and has baffled experts every year since his conviction. Stephen was arrested in connection with taking the life of a young criminal pharmaceutical dealer and his wife. He was ultimately convicted of this crime and sentenced to lethal injection. Though in 2004, Stephen's name began to pop up in the media after he began advocating for more fair prisoner rights. By 2006, he had taken part in a hunger strike in Polunsky that opposed the treatment of death row prisoners. His criminal case has been highly criticized by many researchers throughout the years. Though things never got better for Stephen. He filed several motions throughout his time on death row, the final one being declined on September 2, 2011. He would lose his life 11 days later. His final meal request was quite large, with Stephen requesting 2 pounds of bacon, a large 4-meat pizza, 4 fried chicken breasts, 2 drinks each of Mountain Dew, Pepsi, root beer, and sweet tea, 2 pints of ice cream, 5 chicken fried steaks, 2 hamburgers with bacon, fries, and a dozen garlic breadsticks with marinara on the side. This criminal is a man who likely needs no introduction and was certainly not worthy of such a fantastic final meal. John Wayne Gacy committed countless crimes that we wouldn't even begin to detail here. He was processed through the Illinois court system and was convicted at the age of 52. He was sentenced to lethal injection. In all, he was convicted of taking 33 young lives among various other heinous crimes. For his last meal, he made a shockingly simple request: 12 fried shrimp, a bucket of original recipe KFC chicken, French fries, and a pound of strawberries. Interestingly, before Gacy's conviction, he was the manager of 3 separate KFC locations. It's possible he just wanted to reminisce about the good old days, or he just loved that chicken, and who could blame him? This was a man you would certainly not want to mess with if you saw him on the street. Ricky was a very large and intimidating man who was arrested for his supposed involvement in taking the lives of 2 people. He was taken to trial with a jury finding him guilty of all charges. Ricky doesn't seem to have contested this decision, and he was sent directly to death row for a lethal injection. For his final meal, Ricky requested a fairly typical Southern meal. He asked for a steak, fried chicken, a cup of cherry Kool-Aid, and a slice of pecan pie. He ate the entire meal, though he never touched the pie. When the time came for him to leave this world, he was escorted out of his cell, though as he was exiting the cell, he told the officers not to touch his pie because he was saving it for later. The guards were not allowed to dispose of the pie until he had been successfully injected. This man was despised by every person who dared walk near him during his trial and ultimate conviction. Robert was found guilty of claiming the lives of 2 teenage boys back in 1978, though he spent many years in the court system and prison system, with his execution not taking place until 1992. Interestingly, Robert was the first person to be sentenced to death in the state of California since 1967. He was sentenced to a gas chamber, in which the prison staff was asked to operate for the first time in 25 years. Robert was asked to submit a request for his final meal, with him asking for a 21-piece bucket of Kentucky Fried Chicken, 2 large Domino's pizzas, ice cream, a bag of jelly beans, a 6-pack of Pepsi, and a pack of Camel cigarettes. Really though, we have to ask, what's up with the trend of these death row inmates requesting KFC chicken? We certainly hope there isn't a correlation here. This man was arrested in Texas after he was determined to have claimed the life of another person. He was sentenced to lethal injection after taking part in a fairly straightforward trial. Ronnie took a bit of time to think about his last meal request, ensuring that he ordered precisely what he loved most. In the end, he submitted a request to be served baked chicken, mashed potatoes with country gravy, sweet peas, vegetables, bread, tea, water, and a glass of fruit punch. This was a seemingly great choice for a final meal, though it seems like Ronnie's request was submitted too late. In 2011, Texas passed a law that abolished the choice for a death row inmate's final meal. Instead, he was served the same thing as everyone else in his unit, with his requests being disregarded. Stories like this almost make you feel bad for these inmates, but considering his crime, Ronnie got exactly what he deserved. Ronnie Lee Gardner was arrested and convicted in 1985 for taking the life of another person, though he remained in the prison system for 25 years before his fateful day had finally arrived. Interestingly, Ronnie made a special request for his execution, which the judge granted. He wanted to be executed by a firing squad. As he famously quoted during his trial, "I'd prefer to die of old age, Your Honor, but if that ain't possible, I'll take the firing squad." For his final meal, Gardner requested a steak, a lobster tail, a slice of apple pie, and vanilla ice cream. He also requested to enjoy his meal while watching the Lord of the Rings trilogy. We can only assume that his choice of film was because the 3 films would take a total of 11.4 hours to complete, extending his time on Earth as much as possible. This is a criminal who needs no introduction. However, if you're unfamiliar with Ted Bundy, he's a criminal who claimed the lives of at least 35 people in horribly gruesome ways, though he continued to engage in crimes against their bodies after his victims had passed away. He's one of the most notorious criminals in United States history, with him being convicted at the age of 43, being sentenced to the electric chair. Strangely, Bundy declined a special meal. Instead, the prison made the choice for him, providing him with a traditional meal of steak cooked medium rare, eggs over easy, hash browns, toast with butter and jelly, milk, and juice.